Hello and welcome to the Revolutionary Radio Project. I'm your host, Rob Skiba. I'm going to continue where I left off in the previous show, and we're going to go ahead and get right into the next blog. Before I actually get into this blog, I've got an official legal disclaimer. The legal disclaimer is the content of this blog is for informational purposes only. I am not a qualified broker, investor, accountant, tax lawyer, financial planner, or professional advisor of any kind. Nor am I in any way affiliated with any sort of product or service selling or marketing group. I am nothing more than a person who wishes to share some information with you. So as with anything of this nature, please do your own research and consult a qualified professional before making any financial investment decisions. Okay, now we've got the legalese out of the way. Look, I'm just here sharing some information with you, okay? Take it for whatever you think it's worth and do your own research. I have titled this blog, The Omega Plan, with a question mark. And I started off with saying, I could be wrong, but what I am about to talk about in this blog will include my personal opinions and interpretations of historic and recent events, as well as some of my own speculation about the future. This is the reason for the question mark at the end of the above heading. Do your own research and take the following for whatever you feel this information is worth. I've got a picture there showing the United States' involvement with Operation Desert Storm. Back in the early 90s, the U.S. went to war with Iraq. We called it Desert Storm. Prior to that war, Iraq was a world superpower, at least in the sense of its wealth and natural resources. Their currency is called the Dinar. From 1982 until about 1993, one dinar was worth about $3.22 USD, which is US dollars. Their only competitor was Kuwait as the highest valued currency on the planet. After Desert Storm, the UN imposed sanctions on Iraq, and the value of their currency began to plummet. By the time we went back into Iraq in 2003 under pretense of finding weapons of mass destruction, the value of their currency had plummeted to about 3,000 dinar to $1 US. It became completely worthless, and there's a footnote there if you want to check that out for yourself. But what happened after that is nothing short of extraordinary. Before I go any further, I feel it is necessary to point out that the Rothschild family has played a key role in the banking history of this planet, going back at least as far as the 1700s. I think it actually goes back farther than that. I recently came across a website that I believe totally lays out the Illuminati's game plan concerning the manipulation of money through central banks. It is a very lengthy website with a lot of information, so I'm not going to go through it all here. It's a very, very long but very interesting website dealing with the Rothschilds, the Illuminati, and how they work through central banks. Toward the end of that web page, the author states, quote, ancient Babylon, I mean Iraq, is now one of 6 nations left in the world who don't have a Rothschild-controlled central bank. This war is mainly about stealing Iraq's water supply for Israel and is being fought with the blood of the American military, which the state of Rothschild, I mean Israel, control. I disagree with that, actually. My personal opinion is that it is not about water. It is not about oil. It's about building the completed New World Order. I believe it is about raising Babylon, hence the title of my book, which is what these blogs are, the chapters for that book. In 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq for the second time, the elite immediately went to work on a plan that would eventually change the world. There's a link here to another website where I've got the following text from. The website header is, before Iraq's economy can even begin to recover from the war, its banking system must be rebuilt. You can click on that link to read the full article. But I pulled this portion of it, written by Gordon Platt. It says, the ruins in Baghdad of the Central Bank of Iraq, its marble-clad walls collapsed, are symbolic of the condition of the entire Iraqi banking sector. A majority of the country's banks were bombed, torched, and looted during the war. 6 months after the United States declared an end to major combat operations, only a few banks are open for business. Late in 2002, even before war in Iraq was certain, high-level U.S. Treasury officials began drawing up plans for financial reconstruction. Now, that's significant, folks. We didn't go to war with Iraq until 2003. Okay, so why are U.S. Treasury officials drawing up plans for reconstructing Iraq's banking system a full year before we even went to war with Iraq? That should give you a clue why, another reason why 9/11 was a bunch of crap, was a total facade, was a lie, was a false flag operation. Need I say more? Anyway, they knew that reopening the banks after the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime would be essential to get the country running again. Note, that's written in 2002. They knew reopening the banks after the fall of Saddam Hussein's regime, which didn't even happen until a full year later. Man, we got to wake up, folks. They telegraph this stuff all the time, but most people aren't paying attention. We always look back at it on hindsight. We got to see what they're communicating up front so we know what's coming. Anyway, they were right, and the widespread devastation left economic planners with a clean slate on which to design a new banking and financial system. Oh, big surprise. That was the plan all along. What has emerged is a radical proposal to transform a centrally planned economy based on Eastern European communism into a free market model for the Arab world. The occupation government of Iraq, which is us, by the way, has declared a sweeping liberalization that would privatize most state-run industries except oil and gas, roll out the red carpet for foreign investors, and put much of the banking system into foreign hands. It is a plan that many analysts and economists say is bound to fail in a country that lacks basic institutions and laws vital to the functioning of a free market economy. While at that time, when that article was written, Gordon Platt stated that many analysts and economists say the plan is bound to fail, you have to take into account who it was that was getting involved. I've got another link there for you to check out. The following is from a November 2003 CBS MoneyWatch.com news report. Okay, so this is a year after that Gordon Platt discussion about in 2002. So here in November 2003, the CBS report says, meanwhile, the CPA, which is a U.S.-led coalition provision authority, named a 13-bank consortium led by J.P. Morgan Chase to operate the newly created Trade Bank of Iraq, which will support Iraqi imports of equipment and commodities funded through the Development Fund for Iraq. The CPA-administered fund receives most of the proceeds from Iraqi oil exports. J.P. Morgan Chase was selected over 5 competitors, including groups led by Bank of America, Bank One, Citicorp, and Wachovia, as well as UK-based HSBC, which applied as a single bank. J.P. Morgan Chase Bank went in and headed up a 13-bank consortium to establish the new Trade Bank of Iraq, and I got that in quotes, but in reality, it was the new Central Bank of Iraq. There's a link to prove it. It takes you to the CBI website. I see somebody here in the chat room has already posted a link to that. They immediately got rid of the old Saddam dinars and created brand new currency using De La Rue, and there's a link there for you to check out De La Rue. The new, completely worthless currency was printed with the most high-tech anti-counterfeit measures of any currency on the entire planet. Okay, folks, you got to ask yourself, why is the most worthless currency in the world also one of the most anti-counterfeit protected in the world? Well, considering the players, you have to make the conclusion that it should be obvious. They have a plan for this currency. Up until December of 2008, you could actually buy the new Iraqi dinar, sometimes referred to as the NID, from Chase Banks as a normal currency exchange, which I did back in 2008. I was a missionary at that time, and I'd been traveling all around the world. In 6.5 years, I've been to 15 countries, and whenever I would travel overseas, I would go to the bank and do a standard currency exchange, say, hey, you know, I'm going to Europe or Africa or wherever. I would exchange U.S. dollars for the currency of the country that I was going to. So I just walked into Chase Bank and said, I would like to purchase some Iraqi dinar, and it was a simple exchange. I gave them U.S. currency, and they gave me Iraqi currency. Simple. You could literally just walk in and exchange USD for IQD, which is the Iraqi dinar, also sometimes referred to as the NID, just like you would any other world currency. This was a bit unusual, though, because Iraq, for all intents and purposes, was no longer a player on the world market due to the still imposed UN sanctions and the fact that their currency was completely worthless. So it's one thing to go to Chase Bank and say, hey, listen, I'm going to Canada, I want some Canadian money, or I'm going to Europe, I want some euros, because they are all world players. Okay, these other countries are all they are all on the open market. Iraq was not. So the fact that you could go to Chase Bank, of all places, and get Iraqi dinar was a bit unusual. Incidentally, Chase got the IQD from Bank of America, which is another story altogether that I won't get into here. Anyway, as stated above, before the first Iraq war, the Iraqi dinar was one of the highest valued currencies on the planet. At one time, it was worth about $4.86 to one dinar. That was back in 1932. Okay, one dinar would cost us $4.86. All right. After the second Iraq war started, their currency plummeted to about 3,000 dinar to $1 US. But watch this. Enter J.P. Morgan Chase and Associates, and the value of the dinar steadily began to increase in value from about 3,000 to 1 to now about 1,170 to 1, where it has sat for over a year now. Below is a screen capture of a chart that I pulled today from Yahoo Finance, and there's a link there if you want to pull your own chart. Check it out on Yahoo Finance. That shows how the dinar has appreciated in value over the past 5 years. And I've got the image right there. It shows you how what the progress of the appreciation has been for the Iraqi dinar versus the U.S. dollar. Now, it's a little confusing when you first look at this chart because I use the word appreciated, and yet you see the graph falling. But what you're looking at is the value of the dinar as compared to the U.S. dollar. The Yahoo Finance website only allows you to go back 5 years, but still you can see that in August of 2006, the dinar was worth about $1,500 to one U.S. dollar. In 2009, it leveled off at roughly 1,170 to 1. As of this writing, you can see that it has crept down or up in value. The graph has gone down, but it means up in value, to 1,163 to 1. But so even left to grow on its own, it has appreciated steadily in value since 2003, just kind of steadily growing all by itself. This has been largely due to our efforts in helping to stabilize the country of Iraq, and it is still appreciating in value. Pay attention to what this means now. While the rest of the world's economies are plummeting, the United States included, Iraq's is just quietly growing in value, almost in the background and completely unnoticed by the public at large, primarily due to the mainstream media skewing our view of what is really happening over there. But every now and then, the press will do a piece like those in this playlist. And I've got a YouTube video playlist there. It has about 3 videos in there. And you can see, from time to time, CNN, some of these other CNBC have done little news pieces, kind of just crammed in there with a whole bunch of other news. Well, they'll say things like, hey, investing in Iraq is a good thing, and you might want to consider investing in their currency. Now in other news. So, it's just kind of really passively thrown out there every now and then, but you should pay attention to these things.
Still with me, Jim Grant, editor of Grant's Interest Rate Observer. And Jim, let's switch gears now. Let's move away from the crisis that has engulfed the credit markets here.
It's too disturbing.
Okay, too disturbing. And let's spend a little time. You've written something about investing in Iraq and the Iraq stock market. And tell us a little bit about that. It seems kind of paradoxical.
Okay, but this is only for widows and orphans.
All right. Your caveat is well noted.
Much too small for professional investors. But the way to approach this is a bar bet. Say, what is the strongest currency in the world, and what is the best acting stock market since the troubles of July? And somebody will say, well, China's been acting very well, or Colombia, or no, it's Iraq. And the Iraqi dinar, first of all, is a currency of no great repute, but is the only currency in the Middle East that is not pegged to the dollar. Well, the Kuwaiti dinar can float a little bit, but not much. So the Iraqi dinar can express the collective view of prospects in the Middle East and of prospects for the dollar. And the dinar is a moose. And I submit to you, Tim, that money is sometimes misinformed, but it is never insincere. And this money might be mistaking events in Iraq and the prospects for it. But I'm saying that this country were really living up to the democratic script, that line would go the other way.
So what is it that's driving this? I mean,
well, I mean, a lot of petrodollars. You know, there's a lot of entrepreneurial activity in Iraq. Direct investment is now possible. This tiny Baghdad Stock Exchange was open to foreign investment in August, and it is up 54% since early July, an expectation of foreign money. Who knows whether it's going to, But,
what does it tell you about the tenor of the times?
It tells me that markets are forever paradoxical. They forever surprise you. They shatter the prognostications of the great and the good, and they will not read the New York Times front page and always take it literally. And here we have, I think every adult in America knows that nothing good is happening in Iraq. Certainly every newspaper reader knows that. And yet, this is the picture of a bull market. And I'm thinking this is Hillary Clinton's worst nightmare of a bull market.
All right. Well, I don't want to get political because we are taking stock.
Why not?
Because I want to ask you, how is it, just quickly, how do investors actually participate in this?
They don't. I mean,
they don't.
It's very hard to buy this stuff. And again, the market cap of the Baghdad Stock Exchange is the equivalent of $2 billion, and they transact on a whiteboard with erasers. So,
so maybe we'll wait until they go electronic for some people, make it seem a little bit better. Going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much.
You are welcome, Jim.
Of Grant's interest.
So, there are those in the know, and every now and then, the average Joe might catch videos like these on the news. Sure, there are a lot of websites out there calling this whole thing a scam and telling people to stay away. You can do your own research and decide for yourself. I've done mine, and I am fully convinced this is a good deal. I do find it funny, though, that some of the guys in those videos kept saying that they didn't know where to get Dinar and that it's very hard to buy this stuff and such. If you watch those videos, you'll hear some of those people saying things like it's so difficult to find these things and don't know where to get them, whatever. That's baloney, okay? I find that quite ridiculous. It is easy to buy Dinar online. I have not used DinarBanker.com, so I cannot personally vouch for them. I can, however, talk about I've done business with DinarTrade.com, and I have referred many people to them as well. So I do trust them. Again, I'm not licensed to give any advice. Take it whatever you feel it's worth, but I've used DinarTrade. I trust them. Again, as stated in the disclaimer at the top of this blog, I am not licensed, nor am I in any way qualified to give financial advice. So why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you this because I care about you, and I believe that in these troubled times, this is an incredible opportunity that can be taken advantage of for very little money. Is it a risk? Of course it is. The Middle East is constantly in turmoil, but as my dad says, never invest more than you're willing to lose. I mean, seriously, folks, I could spend $100 taking my family to the movies, especially these 3D movies nowadays. It's like $14 a ticket, and you get popcorn and everything else. You spend $100 going to a movie, and the movie could suck, okay? And you still spend $100. So why not skip the movie and take a little risk, right? To be honest with you, I didn't get involved with any of this because of all the information I read on financial websites. I didn't even get involved because of what I saw in the current political news. I got involved because of what I saw in prophecy concerning the rise of Babylon. Check out this interview between Glenn Beck and Joel Rosenberg and consider what the Bible has to say about Iraq in the last days.
First of all, Iraq. Everybody is covering the bad news in Iraq. You say Iraq, and this isn't political speak, you're saying that Bible prophecy says Iraq's going to get very, very good.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I just spent 9 days in Iraq about a month ago. We traveled through 5 provinces without armed guards, without armored personnel carriers, without Apache helicopters. You can drive around in Iraq. You need some interpreters. Things are getting better there. The Bible says that Iraq, which was known in the Bible days as Babylon, will not only emerge in the last days, it will emerge as the wealthiest, most peaceful, most powerful nation on the face of the planet. So the question is, how do we get from the chaos that there has been over the last few years to the wealthiest country on the planet in the last days? Something must get better. So I'm saying that all the naysayers who are saying we cannot win, apparently we do win. And by the way, I think we are winning. The problem is if we pull out too quickly, there could be a disaster. But I think we're heading in the right direction, and we can have confidence that it gets better.
I don't know. You may have convinced me that maybe I'm I'm all of a sudden for a quick pullout. If it has to get better before everything comes, I mean, maybe.
Well, then, of course, to be clear and full disclosure, Babylon then becomes the center of the Antichrist in the end. So it gets better, and then it gets much, much worse. So, so people ask me, are we making Iraq safe for the Antichrist or safe for democracy? And it's a little bit of both.
That is that's the interesting thing about your book when I read it. It is such a different look at Iraq. I mean, you at one point in your book you explain in one way why we're not ever mentioned as a country or a force at all in end times prophecy. And it's because America is taken out, and New York and several other cities are vaporized. But
we don't know that biblically for sure.
The
novel looks at what could happen.
Yeah,
but
I understand.
The United States clearly isn't in end times prophecy.
You were just trying to take us out. You were in the book. You were I mean, in the book you were trying to explain why we're not.
Why we're not there.
Correct. Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
So then, but
that's an important one to be clear.
Yeah, no. So Iraq plays such a huge role, and it's so wealthy and everything else that in your book you say, because New York's vaporized, the president, the head of the UN is out, and Iraq comes and says, why don't you build the UN here?
Absolutely. I mean, who knows if how it will happen? But we know because of Revelation, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, all the prophets make it clear. Babylon, Iraq, it becomes the center of all world attention, along with Israel, in the final days of the last days. And what's interesting about that, Glenn, is that for 2,000 years, Israel and Iraq did not exist. How could they be the centerpieces of all human attention if the two countries didn't exist? Now they do, and now they are dominating our headlines.
And Saddam Hussein was building or rebuilding ancient Babylon, and you have Ahmadinejad actually building roads from where they say the well is where the 12th Imam, right?
Right.
Okay, where the well from the 12th Imam is going to come out of this well, and then they're building roads that point to Babylon. So he's making a path from where the 12th Imam is coming out to the seat of power. I mean, these people really believe this. Is it true that we haven't bombed parts of Iraq because of not only the historic significance but the biblical significance of Babylon?
Babylon itself, Babylon is a province, it's also a city, but there's really no way living in current Babylon. It's being reconstructed. There's no question that American forces were very careful about bombing in that area. However, there was some archaeological destruction as troops were kind of coming in and out of there, and that was a problem. But I interviewed, for my previous book, Epicenter, a nonfiction book, Epicenter, you and I have talked about it. I interviewed the chief economic advisor to the current prime minister of Iraq, and I said, the New York Times and other places are reporting that you guys have a plan to rebuild the city of Babylon as a cultural epicenter. He said, absolutely, and he walked me through the plans that they have to rebuild the city. They believe cultural tourism in Iraq will be the second largest money producer after oil 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Now, right now, it's almost impossible to imagine people going on a vacation to Iraq.
Oh, no. Come to Iraq.
I just went there, but my family thought I was crazy. President of Crazy Town. So, but look, the Bible says that's what will happen. People will come there from all over the world. Revelation describes all the merchants of the earth are coming to Iraq. That's not that far off, I don't think.
We'll be back with Joel Rosenberg in just a minute. And remember, the only way you can get an exclusive contact from Joel on the end of days.
No, I don't agree with Joel's take on America in the last days, because of my theories concerning our role in actually bringing about the Antichrist rise to power. And you can click on that link to read what I'm talking about there. But I do agree with what he has to say about Iraq's emergence as an economic supercenter. And I don't think it is just a coincidence that after the third horse of the apocalypse rides, the statement is made, quote, "And I heard what seemed to be a voice from the midst of the four living creatures saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm the oil and the wine." That's from Revelation 6:6 in the Amplified Bible. Wikipedia has this to say about dinars. It says the dinar is the name of the official currency in several countries. The gold dinar was a coin dating back to the early days of Islam, issued by many rulers, and the Islamic gold dinar is to this day still used as a coin or unit of account separate from the currencies listed below, and that's below in the Wikipedia article, obviously. Many claim that the name of the gold dinar was derived from the denarius, a Roman currency whose name meant 10 times, as it was originally worth 10 asses, but it is unknown whether this is the true derivation. Regardless of whether or not a dinar truly is derived from the Roman currency known as the denarius, I do find the similarity a little too hard to ignore, especially when I consider Babylon's role in the last days. And I'll elaborate more on this shortly. For now, here's the deal concerning this window of opportunity that I'm presenting to you. Iraq's current situation is similar to that of Japan and Germany after World War II. Countries have had their currencies devalued because of war before. Then, once everything gets back on track and the country rebuilds and rejoins the global community, their currency will revalue, or RV, or in some cases it may be reinstated, which is often depicted as an RI, to its pre-war value. So what does that mean with regard to the Iraqi dinar? Remember at the end of the last blog, I told you that Iraq had finally announced its new government. What I didn't tell you was that the UN also released the sanctions that were imposed on them. And there's a picture there of Joe Biden and some Iraqi guys there at the United Nations. The Council lifted sanctions that have been in place since Hussein's 1990 invasion of Kuwait. Iraq will now be able to pursue a civilian nuclear program and take control of its oil and natural gas revenue on June 30th, 2011. The Council also terminated all remaining activities of the controversial Oil for Food program, which ran from 1996 to 2003 and helped ordinary Iraqis cope with the sanctions. Curiously, this happened exactly 2 years to the day from the date that Chase Bank stopped selling dinar over the counter, which was December 15th, 2008. I got my dinar before that happened, and I do remember December 15th when they stopped selling them. So I find it awfully interesting, and the Illuminati numbers mean things, so there's probably some significance to that date, but it's not a coincidence that Chase Bank stopped selling them on December 15th, 2008, and then 2 years later, exactly to the day, UN sanctions are released from Iraq. All right? What this means is they are now able to join the global community again. But you can't play in the global market unless you have a viable tradable currency. That means Iraq has to RV or RI its currency to a level that is comparable to the world market. So now all the speculators are freaking out, expecting Iraq to either RV or RI in the very near future. What does that mean for the investor? The idea here is that the value of the Iraqi dinar could quickly RV to at least a 1-to-1 ratio, although many believe it could go as high as it was before the invasion of Kuwait, which would mean it could RI at a 3-to-1 ratio or even higher. Essentially, you buy it now while it's cheap. Then when it rises in value, you go to the bank and exchange it for U.S. currency. And yes, once it is on the global market as a tradable currency, you will be able to exchange anywhere currency is normally exchanged, which includes most major banks. So, for example, you could purchase 500,000 dinar for about $640, including shipping, handling, and COD charges. Notice I said COD, which is kind of cool. So you don't pay anything online. You just simply order it, and it shows up at your door. You can inspect it, check it out, and then hand the check to the mailman, and it goes from there. So I think that's a pretty good deal. Anyway, if the dinar RVs at a 1-to-1 ratio, your small investment just turned into $500,000 virtually overnight. If it goes back to its old value at, let's say, roughly 3-to-1, your $640 investment just turned into more than $1.5 million. Not a bad deal. I'd like to see any other investment pay off that big, that fast. Now, I've got a little commercial break here. And now that I've got your attention, if this is the first time you have ever heard anything about the Iraqi dinar and you think it's something you might invest in, and if it pans out the way I've just described, would you please prayerfully consider tithing or contributing at least a portion of your tremendous gain into our ministry? I'm not asking this to give you any kind of guilt trip, and there's really no way I could track this anyways, but I am asking for your help to produce Seed the Series. Seed the series is the reason why I'm doing all these blogs in the first place, because these blogs are kind of the undercurrent foundation for the storyline of Seed. Seed is the episodic sci-fi show that God has laid on our heart to create. We can't do it alone. We estimate that each episode will cost about $1 million to produce, and that's in order to compete with shows like The Event, Fringe, and other shows like that, which have a $2 to $3 million per episode price tag, but that's an LA price tag. We have determined that here in Dallas, we can get the same production value, a $3 million production value here in Dallas, for about $1 million. So that's where we believe each episode of Seed is estimated to cost about $1 million a piece. We have 72 episodes outlined and 3 scripts ready to produce right now, but we're lacking the funds to go into production. So if you've been blessed by this information that I have labored to bring to you, and if you believe in what we're trying to do with media to reach the world, would you please consider returning the blessing and commit to using at least some of your new wealth to help us accomplish our work for the kingdom? I have spent a lot of time researching and putting this series of blogs together, and I also receive on a regular basis updates on the status of the Dinar. And I've got a form there. It says if you'd like to be added to our Dinar email database, please fill out the form below. And that just simply puts you into an email database for people that I send out Dinar updates. And I don't send them out all the time, mainly because it seems like every weekend since 2008 somebody's claimed that it's going to RV. And so we've had a lot of disappointment over the last few years, but it has never been in the position that it is in right now. UN sanctions have never been released, and the government was not fully formed. So any hindrance that had previously been in place to this currency revaluing or reinstating, that is no longer the case anymore. So we believe it could go any day now. Okay, now for what I call the Omega Plan. Again, this is just a theory, so keep an open mind and work with me on this. We've already seen how the United States went into Iraq under false pretenses. As I stated in the first 3 blogs, I believe there is a totally different reason why we are there. At any rate, the fact is J.P. Morgan Chase went in and helped set up a central bank. That means the Illuminati now has a vested interest in making sure Iraq succeeds. And so far it has. Their country is being rebuilt, and their currency is growing stronger. Smart investors are highly encouraged to invest, and speculators have been going crazy because Iraq is now poised to become a world superpower again, almost overnight. Meanwhile, as all of that was going on, the U.S. economy had a planned crash. Our economy continues to crash, and I believe it will ultimately tank in the very near future. The same could be said for most major world economies. So what's going on? Back in July of 2010, President Obama talked about downsizing our military forces in Iraq. By the time 2010 drew to a close, in early December, the UN had finally released Iraq from the sanctions that had been put on them. That effectively put them back on the world market as a viable player once again. All that was left was for the newly formed government to be announced. And that happened on December 21st, 2010, the same day the moon turned blood red and floated over the shoulders of Orion, or shall we say Babylon's founder, King Nimrod. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. You know, just as an aside, I used to travel with an acting traveling group, a theater group around the country, and this roadie was on one of the shows that I was on, and we were having a conversation one time, and somebody made a statement about coincidence, and he said, you know, my mom used to always say that coincidence is just God being anonymous. And you know what? I subscribe to that. I really don't believe coincidence is just happenstance, chance, or whatever. I think there's something really significant to be considered, especially with regard to this kind of stuff. Anyway, Iraq also recently announced their 2011 budget, and there's a link for you to check that out, which cannot be sustained at 1163 to 1. There's a quote from the source there. It says, Iraq Central Bank said that the current budget for 2011 is the biggest in Iraq's history. All right? In order for all they have planned to occur, the nation must have a tradable currency. Therefore, all the speculation is that they will revalue, or RV, and some even suggest a reinstatement, an RI, back to its former value before the sanctions. And that is not unreasonable, considering the country certainly can sustain that value with its natural resources, just as it did back before the sanctions were imposed. Iraq does, after all, have one of the largest oil reserves on the planet, just sitting there under its soil, waiting for global consumption. Unlike our country, that it has a fiat money system, their currency can actually be backed by something of value. This incredible event literally has the potential to reset the global economy. Think about the implications of that. And if little old speculators like you and me stand to reap a good return from investing in Iraqi dinars, just imagine how rich the Rothschilds and Rockefellers are going to be, considering they likely own billions of dollars worth of dinars. And you know they do, as does the U.S. Treasury and the treasuries of other countries as well. And they would have bought them when it was over 2,000 to 1 ratio, probably even 3,000 to 1. So if Iraq RVs at a 1 to 1, that's a staggering amount of money. But remember, Iraq's currency used to be worth more than $3.22 to 1 dinar. If they RI at the pre-1990 rate, forget it. They've just made the biggest ROI, return on investment, of all time. They will absolutely own the world, which has always been their goal. Since World War II, the U.S. dollar has been the world's dominant reserve currency. That was planned, and so was the crash that started here in America. When America fell, the world fell. But wait, we helped to both crush Iraq and then rebuild her. Or should I say the bankers did. Now, when the Iraqi currency bails out the world economy, do you think the world will want to stay on the U.S. dollar as its reserve currency? No way. China and Russia have already made moves to get off of it. The U.S. put the world in the economic state it's in right now. Therefore, I believe there's no way the world is going to trust America in the future. And since the Iraqi dinar will have helped to save the world economy, it is in the perfect position to be raised up as the new reserve currency. To me, this makes perfect sense, not just for economic reasons, but also for prophetic reasons as well. How far away are we from finding out if any of this theory is true? Not far at all, in my opinion. Now, those who have purchased Iraqi dinars at a substantial discount wait patiently to see how wealthy they are going to become virtually overnight. In war, when an army drops a bomb and civilians get hurt, they call it collateral damage. As stated above, I believe the elite are well stocked in Iraqi dinar. The rich will become substantially richer. Those of us who have a few hundred or even $1,000 worth of dinar stashed away will be nothing more than collateral beneficiaries of the greatest economic super plan in history. But I believe said beneficiaries will only have a short window of time to benefit from this financial miracle. Why? Because the elite don't want rich people. They want poor people who are easier to herd and control. They also want billions of dead people. So they certainly don't have our best interest in mind. And I've got a link there to some information regarding the Georgia Guidestones. For those of you who have never heard of the Georgia Guidestones, I would suggest that you need to get out there and start getting educated on these things. There's a message on the Georgia Guidestones, which are essentially the elite's new 10 Commandments or plan for the world. Number 1 on the list is maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature. Notice the first new commandment etched in stone. In order to maintain humanity under 500 million, that means more than 6 billion people have to die. So having that in mind, I believe wisdom and discernment is needed, especially for those in the body of Christ who will benefit from this financially. Scripture says that the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. There's a link there, a footnote for you to check out where I got that from. Many people have interpreted that in many ways, but consider this. The Scriptures testify that the parents of Jesus were poor. They could only afford the poor man's offering of 2 pigeons for sacrifice. Again, there's a footnote for you to check out that scripture. But Jesus was destined to do great things. So what happened? you have to go back in time over 500 years to see what God had in mind to solve that problem. The prophet Daniel served 3 kings in Babylon. In that time, he amassed tremendous wealth and became a great teacher of sacred astronomy. And there's a link for you to check out concerning that. Many people believe that the Magi, who came from the east, were in fact Jews who came out of Daniel's school of astronomy. This would seem to make sense. First, they knew the stars well and thus were able to discern the signs they were seeing around the time of Jesus' birth. Second, why else would the wealthy elite of a foreign country want to travel such a distance to pay tribute and honor to the baby king of another nation? It makes perfect sense that the Magi were well-educated, well-trained, and wealthy men of Jewish descent. They knew both astronomy and the prophecies of the Hebrew Scriptures. So what happened? Tremendous wealth was brought out of Babylon and delivered to Jesus. The riches helped to finance his future ministry, just as the herbs and spices were prepared for his future death. We have a similar situation with the Jews leaving Egypt in the Exodus. They had a mission to go and inhabit the Holy Land that would become known as Israel. They brought the wealth of Egypt with them when they did. There's a scripture reference footnote there for you to check out on that. So could it be that we will soon see a repeat of history? Most of the people that I know who own Dinar are believers in Jesus Christ, and there are a lot of them. So, will the wealth of the wicked East, Babylon, be brought to the body of Christ again to enable us to accomplish our work in these last days? I believe so. Will the first be the last? Babylon was where the first world order without God was attempted under Nimrod. The Bible talks about it rising again. But how will it happen? I believe we are seeing the Omega plan falling into place. In summary, the following is a timeline of what I believe has happened and what will happen to usher in Babylon's rise to power once again. The first bullet point I have listed here is on September 11th, 1990. President George Bush Sr. announced his plan for a new world order. And there's a YouTube video there of that speech, and I think quite fitting, it has German subtitles. Since, after all, I believe we are the Fourth Reich, Nazis. Anyway, you can watch that for yourself. Next bullet point. In 1999, 9 years later, Zahi Hawass discovered the tomb of Osiris. Then we come to September 11th, 2001. 11 years to the day from the time Daddy Bush announced his plans for a new world order that will succeed. A terrible event rocked the United States. And what do you know? Junior Bush just so happened to be in office to push the New World Order plan through. For reasons I will not get into here, I believe that this event was completely planned and orchestrated from within. Soon after the events of 9/11, the Patriot Act was passed and our Bill of Rights began to be stripped away from us. Little by little, our Constitution began to be shredded and tossed out the window. Cameras started popping up on every street corner. Our phones, emails, and pretty much every area of our life became monitored, including, by the way, Blog Talk Radio. Hi, CIA. Excuse my language, bastards, because I know they're listening. And we gave away more and more of our freedoms, all in the name of security. Today, Big Brother bastards are all around you. The stage has been set for a new world order, and things are falling nicely in place for a new world order, a new world government to be formed. Drop of a hat. Could happen any second now. In April of 2003, archaeologists digging in Iraq claimed to have found the tomb of Gilgamesh. A month later, the U.S. moved into Iraq under pretense of finding weapons of mass destruction. As everyone now knows, we did not find weapons, but I do believe we found a weapon of mass destruction. We found Nimrod himself. And in case there are any doubts, consider the fact that one of the first things our troops did when they entered Iraq was raid the Museum of Baghdad. What? That's right. We plundered a museum. There's a link for you to check out on that as well. And from that link, I have a little blurb here. It says, the museum was the victim of a carefully planned assault. The The thieves who took the most valuable material came prepared with equipment to lift the heaviest objects, which the staff could not move from the galleries, and had keys to the vaults where the most valuable items were stored. Not since the Nazis systematically stripped the museums of Europe has such a crime been committed. What did they take? That is up for speculation at this point because it is classified. But one website brings up this juicy tidbit of information. On June 7, 2003, U.S. authorities announced that world-famous treasures of Nimrud were recovered from a secret vault in Iraq's central bank. Remember who was in charge of the whole central bank? That would be J.P. Morgan Chase Bank. The artifacts included necklaces, plates, gold earrings, finger and toe rings, bowls, and flasks. Officials said that of the 170,000 items initially believed missing, just 3,000 remained unaccounted for. And of those, 47 were main exhibition artifacts. There's a footnote for you to check out on that. Notice how the trivial things like plates and earrings were discovered and returned. Oh, aren't the Americans great? How nice and noble of them to seek out and return these national treasures to Iraq. But what about the 3,000 unaccounted for items? All we know is cuneiform tablets were in hot commodity. My personal theory is they were looking for anything and everything to do with the portal technology that was the Tower of Babel, especially considering that some of the items stolen were from the world-famous treasures of Nimrud. These blueprints could prove incredibly useful, especially now that they had the guy who built it. That, of course, being Nimrod. Remember they found him? Back in 2003, 1 month before we went into Iraq. On one of his online blogs, Tom Horn adds some further intrigue to this whole scenario, especially considering what I wrote about in the first blog. Tom Horn says, Isaiah says, "Open the gates, ye ruler." Whoever this ruler is, he opens gates in Iraq, Babylon, through which end-time giants, Gibborim, return to the surface of the earth as agents of God's wrath. Noting that Isaiah ties the destruction of Iraq, Babylon with the reappearance of Gibborim in this way, we recall how thousands of U.S. troops on invading Iraq during the Bush administration admittedly filled U.S. containers with archaeological materials, including what some have speculated to be cuneiform tablets pointing to the location of pure-blooded Nephilim buried in underground caves. This is exactly where Enoch said the dead antediluvian Nephilim are, and raising fascinating questions. Would agencies like DARPA have interest in studying or cloning the extinct beings if they were or have been found? Just as a side note on that, there was an article yesterday that scientists have announced, and maybe some of you saw it, but it was in the news yesterday, that they announced that they are actually undergoing plans right now to clone a mammoth from some of the mammoth remains that were found, actually fully intact mammoth bones. Actually, a fully intact mammoth was found in Siberia, several of them, and they're using the genetic material from these discovered mammoths. They are trying to clone, bring back mammoths. You know, Jesus said, as it was in the days of Noah, so is it going to be the coming of the Son of Man. Man, we're there. Get ready to start seeing mammoths walking around. So, you know, Tom Horn's question here, do you think DARPA might consider doing this sort of thing? Yeah, absolutely. Other agencies are already doing it. So if they actually find Nephilim in the desert of Iraq, yeah, you better believe they're going to probably try to bring some of these things back. Anyway, Tom Horn continues here. Could man in his arrogance revive ancient DNA, revitalizing or blending it with other living organisms in a way similar to what the Watchers did in making the first Nephilim? Is the factual reappearance on Earth of such legendary beings verified by Isaiah, who also foresaw transhuman creatures such as satyrs, transgenic, half men, half goats, accompanying the return of the giants in the end times? Or why other apocryphal books like 2 Esdras 5:8 prophesy the birth of monsters for the same period of time? Some may be shocked to learn that in addition to the citations above, the Bible actually describes an ultimate end-time spiritual warfare between the mythological gods and Christ. And Tom quotes, "The Lord will be terrible unto them, for he will famish all the gods of the earth," says Zephaniah 2:11, end quote. "The Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, saith, Behold, I will punish the gods," Jeremiah 46:25. Next bullet point that I have here, as noted above, also in 2003, J.P. Morgan Chase went in and set up the Central Bank of Iraq. They created a new currency that was completely worthless, but yet had some of the most high-tech anti-counterfeit measures of any other currency on the planet. The government and elite of the world purchased billions of dollars worth of dinar at a 2,000 or even 3,000 to 1 U.S. ratio. Then they began the process of appreciating the value to its current rate of 1163 to 1 USD. Already, they are in a position for a healthy return. But with an RV, or they have made trillions. With an RI, they have made trillions and trillions more. In 2008, plans were set in motion to collapse the current world reserve currency, the U.S. dollar. The U.S. economy finally collapsed in 2010, and with it, so did the economies of the world. This perfectly sets the stage for a new world currency that will ultimately serve the New World Order. On December 21st, 2010, on the birthday of Nimrod, his nation was born again, out of the ashes like a phoenix. A blood-red moon floated above Orion's shoulders like a decapitated head above his heavenly body to herald this event. It is a sign of things to come, and the earth shook in response. As you can see from the above timeline, the stage is now set to literally reset the global economy in one day. A new world economy and a new world order are primed and ready for a new world leader to emerge. Could that leader be Nimrod? I believe it will be. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew 24, verses 24 through 28, where Jesus says, For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall shew great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I have told you before. In other words, pay attention. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he is in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. For as the lightning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together. The carcass of Gilgamesh may have been found in the desert. The secret chamber, known as the tomb of Osiris, has been found. The United States eagles are heavily entrenched and invested in the hometown of Nimrod. A lot of signs are pointing to December 21st, 2012 as the date of a significant event. Could that be the day the angel opens the shaft to the bottomless pit and releases the spirit of Apollyon, a.k.a. Apollo, to re-inhabit its former host body? Is this resurrection even possible? There's a link for you to check out on that, to a Tom Horn link website.
Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you.
On August the 17th, 1991, Desert Shield became Desert Storm. The conflict was witnessed by millions through the eye of CNN and the BBC, showing propaganda of the systematic eradication of Saddam's forces by a coalition far superior in technological, political, and economic power. The orchestrators of the war were by no means strangers to controlling major world events. In fact, they have done so for centuries. From the shadows, they have engineered every major war, revolution, and recession. They control everything you read, everything you hear, and everything you see. They have managed to indoctrinate an entire populace to their way of thinking and have infiltrated key positions in places of authority. And it is from the shadows that they have created a new political order, a new economic order, and more sinister, a new religious order. Their ultimate aim is total global domination, and they will stop at nothing to reach their goal. The goal that was outlined in a speech given by former President of the United States, George Bush.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
We talk so much about dispelling myths. How about confirming one? What is this?
Susie, this is the tomb of Osiris.
The god of the underworld. This once extravagant mausoleum, a moat with 4 pillars engraved with hieroglyphics constructed thousands of years ago, was intended to be a shrine for the keeper of the afterlife.
Polls have just now closed in 6 additional states, representing 66 electoral votes.
We must follow no other course. Now it is a seed upon the wind, taking root in many nations. We will confront weapons of mass destruction. We will build our defenses beyond challenge, lest weakness invite challenge. This work continues. The story goes on, and an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm.
Heard the first one come in. I didn't know what it was. It sounded like a missile.
Oh my God, Ed, another plane just hit the World Trade Center.
Wait, oh my God, oh my God, the building fell!
We have no idea what caused this.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies that attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly, answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. You will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever.
Imagine the startling proposition that the Nephilim, the giants, the mighty men of old, the gods and children of the Watchers, could somehow rise up, could somehow be reconstituted inside of a body. And, of course, I've discussed with you before my theory that one of the greatest legends in history could be a record of that having actually happened. And I'm referring to Nimrod, who some scholars also identify as Gilgamesh of Sumerian fame, Apollo of Greek fame, Osiris of Egyptian fame. And this Gilgamesh was a giant who a lot of people didn't even believe was anything more than myth until his grave marker was found a few years back. And then, according to some people, the military swooped in and took possession and control of that dig.
Hey, Tom, I want to interject something. I talked to a special operations general who was there when Gilgamesh's remains, and his words were he was in a state of remarkable preservation, okay? He said they have Gilgamesh's remains. So if they have Gilgamesh and he is Nimrod, they got it. And the whole point was to extract the DNA.
When the Iraqi regime fell in April 2003, the Iraqi Museum in Baghdad and museums in other provinces such as Mosul, Basra, and Babel were exposed to theft for 2 consecutive days. The theft was carried out by local and international networks as well as Iraqi and Arab agents. It is estimated that 170,000 artifacts were stolen, 15,000 of which have no registration records. The most important of these artifacts are the Sumerian cuneiforms, which represents the philosophy of life and death.
Many date back to Mesopotamian times, more than 4,000 years ago.
Artifacts pertaining to the civilizations of the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Chaldeans, and others that go back thousands of years in history, were taken away from the land of the 2 rivers.
In addition, entire book collections from certain historic eras disappeared from the National Library, thus negatively affecting Iraq's wealth of civilization and culture.
One must also mention that some artifacts were stolen and sent to Israel via the American forces.
American troops stood by as Iraq's heritage was plundered. One memorable moment that week was when Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld dismissed the looting in Baghdad as unimportant.
Freedom's untidy, and free people are free to make mistakes and commit crimes and do bad things.
Many of the looters knew which objects they were looking for and where to find them. In other words, they were insiders.
Investigations revealed that the main metal gate of the storage rooms was opened. It was not opened by force, which means a person who knew where the key was participated in the theft.
J.P. Morgan Chase Bank led a 13-bank consortium to establish the Central Bank of Iraq. De La Rue was brought in to print up the new Iraqi dinar. This currency has some of the most anti-counterfeit measures of any other currency on the planet, and yet it is completely worthless. Its current value is approximately $1,163 to $1 US. But from 1982 until about 1993, 1 dinar was worth $3.22.
There are secrets that George W. Bush guards at least as carefully as any entrusted to a president. Secrets he's forbidden to share even with the vice president. Secrets he's held ever since his days at Yale, where in his senior year, like his father and his grandfather, he belonged to Skull and Bones, the elite secret society whose members include some of the most powerful men of the 20th century. President Bush has tapped 5 fellow bonesmen to join his administration. Most recently, the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, William Donaldson, Skull and Bones, 1953. Bones is not restricted to Republicans. Yet another bonesman has his eye on the Oval Office. Senator John Kerry, Democrat, Skull and Bones, 1966.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets, Tim, but one thing is not a secret. I disagree with this president's direction that he's taking the country. We can do a better job, and I intend to do it.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee, and look, I look forward.
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
Saddam, Saddam, Saddam,
Saddam,
Saddam, Saddam, Saddam, Saddam, Saddam, Saddam,
Saddam, Saddam, Saddam Hussein.
War and danger. Continuing danger.
Hour of danger.
Very, very dangerous world. The evil terrorists. Terrorists, 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 terrorists,
Terrorists, terrorists, terrorists, terrorists.
terrorists, 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 terrorists.
Dramatic changes now beginning to occur. John Kerry with 77 electoral votes and George Bush with 66.
These men are like this. The only thing that unifies them are Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones will still keep control of the presidency.
By our efforts, we have lit a fire as well. A fire in the minds of men. It warms those who feel its power. It burns those who fight its progress. And one day, this untamed fire of freedom will reach the darkest corners of our world.
The Bible says that Iraq, which was known in the Bible days as Babylon, will not only emerge in the last days, it will emerge as the wealthiest, most peaceful, most powerful nation on the face of the planet. So the question is, how do we get from the chaos that there has been over the last few years to the wealthiest country on the planet in the last days? Something must get better.
Right.
So people ask me, are we making Iraq safe for the Antichrist or safe for democracy? And it's a little bit of both.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well-funded. And those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. If you say, with profound gratitude and great humility, I accept your nomination for presidency of the United States. All across America, something is stirring. It's been a whirlwind of activity these first 100 days. Finally, I believe that my next 100 days will be so successful I will be able to complete them in 72 days. And on the 73rd day, I will rest.
What did the President and the Pope talk about this morning?
The Vatican positions, you know, don't fall into the usual left and right of American politics. The Pope, for example, is for stronger world government, and he just issued an encyclical, a sort of Vatican position paper, calling for much stronger regulation of the financial world. And at the same time, of course, the Pope is opposed to abortion and stem cell research, which Mr. Obama favors.
E pluribus unum.
That was Latin. It's what's inscribed on a quarter.
Out of many, one.
Of course, the visual highlight was the president touring the pyramids, outside and in.
Purification, mummification.
Self-identification.
That looks like me. Look at those ears.
Separated at birth from a hieroglyphic, but the president's guide saw another resemblance.
Mr. President, you look like King Tut.
I've been told.
Yes, it's true.
He should know about King Tut. Dr. Sahi Hawass oversaw scans of Tut's mummy that produced this likeness. The president's trip inspired Egyptians to display decorations calling Obama the new King Tut of the world. But even the new King Tut couldn't budge a pyramid. Still, it's good practice for trying to push peace in the Mideast.
Scientists from all over the world are trying to figure out what caused a mysterious blue light to spiral in the sky over Norway on Wednesday.
Early yesterday morning, just before dawn, this appeared in the Norwegian sky. A blue light, small at first, growing into a spiral, and then disappearing into what appeared to be a black hole.
Thousands of Norwegians bombarded the Meteorological Institute to ask what that light could have possibly been. Some feared it could have been a meteor, others a black hole, and there are even those that thought it could be aliens.
December 21st, 2010, I looked up and I saw a decapitated blood red head, looked like, floating over the shoulders of Orion at 2:22 in the morning. Oh, by the way, 2:22 in the morning Central Standard Time is 3:22 in the morning Eastern Standard Time. 322 is the coveted number of the Skull and Bone Society, of which the whole Bush family has been strongly associated with, as was Kerry. 2 Illuminist, 322. What's that? A skull? A decapitated head on top of a pile of bones? 322. What was happening in Iraq at that very moment? Iraq had just announced the foundation of its newly formed government. And the entire planet, you could look this up for yourself, shook. The seismographic monitors that check earthquake activity around the world, every one of them went into the black that night. What's going on? I don't know.
After nearly 9 years, our war in Iraq ends this month. Today I'm proud to welcome Prime Minister Maliki, the elected leader of a sovereign, self-reliant, and democratic Iraq. In the coming years, it's estimated that Iraq's economy will grow even faster than China's or India's.
Here's my dinars. I got them.
Well, you know, look, I
from the Trade Bank of Iraq, the only ATM in the country.
Look, this is a country that's resource-based, that obviously has tremendous aid by the U.S., but could be very self-sufficient with all these oil companies that we've been talking about that are exploring, they're about to explore there. And so I told my viewer, look, I can't fight it. I would like to know how best to get it, and it would really be great if, you know, these guys set up these ETFs all the time. How about an ETF to play the dinar? That would really be the best way to go.
For the first time in 2 decades, Iraq is scheduled to host the next Arab League summit, and what a powerful message that will send throughout the Arab world. And finally, we're partnering for regional security. For just as Iraq has pledged not to interfere in other nations must not interfere in Iraq. Iraq's sovereignty must be respected. And let us never forget those who gave us this chance. The untold number of Iraqis who've given their lives. More than 1 million Americans, military and civilian, who have served in Iraq. Nearly 4,500 fallen Americans who gave their last full measure of devotion. Tens of thousands of wounded warriors, and so many inspiring military families.
People ask me, are we making Iraq safe for the Antichrist or safe for democracy? And it's a little bit of both.
This is an extraordinary achievement. Nearly 9 years in the making. We're building a new partnership between our nations.
America continues to maintain a high presence in the country, with the largest U.S. embassy in the world located in the capital, Baghdad, with 15,000 members of staff.
Before they leave, U.S. forces will have to transfer dozens of bases to the Iraqis and dispose of or ship out thousands of vehicles.
Sometimes it's too cumbersome to bring a lot of this equipment back to the U.S., so a lot of it's left on bases. We're leaving over 500 military bases to the Iraqis, both to the Iraqi security forces and also to the government.
This is a happy occasion for all of us. It is considered one of the most important days for the Iraqi army and Iraqis, which is the day of handing over Sania base from the friendly side to the Iraqi army.
Your zodiac sign was determined by Babylonians based on what constellation the sun was in on the day you were born. But astronomers at the Minnesota Planetarium Society point out things have changed over thousands of years. The Earth has shifted on its axis and shifted us up one sign on the zodiac wheel.
Right between November 29th and December 17th, there is a new sign. It is Ophiuchus. The constellation is a dude wrestling a snake.
Birds, fish, and all kinds of creatures just dropping dead. 8,000 dead turtle doves in Italy. Hundreds of birds dead in Rockwell, Texas. 500 red-winged blackbirds in Louisiana. 3,000 dead red-winged blackbirds in Arkansas. Several hundred dead in Kentucky. On the fish, several hundred snapper fish in New Zealand. Thousands of dead fish in Florida. 40,000 devil crabs in the UK. 80,000 drumfish in Arkansas, 2 million spotted croakers in Maryland in the last 2 weeks. So this is all a sign of the apocalypse.
But as the days of Noe were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be.
Plans to allow scientists to create embryos that are part human and part animal are set for approval by the official regulator in Britain.
There shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth, distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken.
Look at the size of this thing as seen from space. Records fell.
Biggest snowfall in recorded history.
100 million people will be impacted by this storm. That's 1/3 the population of the United States.
Then said he unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilences, and fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. And except those days should be shortened, there should no flesh be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened.
The Illuminati started with Nimrod in Babylon. It has all come full circle for this same nation to rise to global superpower status nearly overnight. My prediction is that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, will set the IQD, the Iraqi dinar, up to be the New World Order's one world reserve currency, replacing the dollar in the very near future, probably after all the dust settles. I believe Nimrod will resurrect, and the world will be astonished at this beast of antiquity rising out of the water-encompassed secret chamber as the God King, of which nearly every culture on the planet has a memory. It may be accompanied by a significant UFO event, but that's a subject for another blog coming soon. As I said at the beginning of this blog, I could be wrong about all of this. Do your own research. I've done mine, and these are the conclusions that I have come to as a result. Watch and pray. Be ready and look up. So much the more as you see the days approaching.